In chapter 31 of Deuteronomy, Moses begins what we would call his fifth and final message or sermon to the people of Israel who are getting ready to go into the land, to conquer the land. Of course, Moses is not going to go with them, and so he's giving them this reminder of the law and reminder of God's commands and many other things, and this is his final discussion here at this time. And so as we look at this chapter, Deuteronomy chapter 31, I'm actually in Numbers 31, that's not going to work. We find that we're visiting Moses on his birthday. And that's unusual. It says in verse 2, and he says, I'm 120 years old today. That is unusual in the Bible. You don't hear very often about somebody's birthday. For example, we don't know the day Jesus was born. Of course, we celebrated on December 25, but almost everybody knows that wasn't the case. So it's very unusual in Scripture to find something like this, but here Moses is 120 years old today. And he is saying that it is the Lord your God who will cross over ahead of you. And Joshua, verse 3, is the one who will cross ahead of you. Moses said, I'm not going to go with you, and we know why. He had sinned against God back at a place called Meribah when he struck a rock and commanded water to come out of that rock. And God had not told him to do that. And something in that process, the way he did it, the disobedience to God, and maybe even taking credit for bringing the water out of the rock, it was very distasteful to the Lord. He said, you did not treat me as holy, and because of that, I am going to not allow you to go into the land. So he is, as we'll see before we're done with Deuteronomy, he gets to see it, but he doesn't get to enter it. And so God is going to lead them, however. He said not to worry, and Joshua will replace me in that process. So as we go on with chapter 31, we find a rather constant cadence of being strong and courageous. In verse 6, he says, be strong and courageous. He will not forsake you. He will not fail you. Verse 7, Moses said to Joshua, in the sight of all the Israel, be strong and courageous. We go down to verse 23. Then he commissioned Joshua, the son of Nun, and said, be strong and courageous. When we come to Joshua chapter 1, several times in Joshua 1, Joshua himself and the people are told to be strong and courageous. And then also we find that in other places in the Old Testament. So this is an important message to them. Apparently they needed that. Apparently they needed to remember to be strong and courageous. This is not going to be an easy thing. They're going up against a formidable enemy, and they cannot conquer unless the Lord is with them. And so be strong and courageous in what the Lord has for them. Now, as he replaces Moses, we find that in verse 10, for example, some things that they were to do. Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, at the time of the year of the remission of debts, at the Feast of Booths, when all Israel comes to appear before the Lord your God at the place where he will choose, you shall read this law in front of all Israel in his hearing. So it's important here that the law, and by the law here, almost everybody believes that we're talking about the book of Deuteronomy, which is the law in miniature, perhaps, a summation of it. So every 7th year, at one of the big feasts, the Feast of Booths, they were to read the law to all the people of Israel. So they were to hear it periodically, every 7 years. Other things about the book of Deuteronomy we could mention. Back in 17, 18, and 19, the kings were to write their own copy of the book of Deuteronomy, keep it with them, and read it all the days of their life. And so it was to be an integral part of the life of the kings. And then in verse 11 of this particular passage of Scripture, as they read it in front of all the people, and then in verse 26, we find this to take this book of the law and place it beside the Ark of the Covenant. So the law itself is placed, this Deuteronomy is placed beside the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies. Deuteronomy seems to indicate it could have been placed later into the Ark itself, but now for sure it's there. So we have the kings writing their own copy. We have the people hearing it every 7 years. We have the kings reading it all the days of their lives. We have it in the Holy of Holies with the Ark of the Covenant. It is an important thing in the life of the people of Israel, and they need to remember that the law is that important to them. As we think of this, we find though that the people of Israel are not going to be doing particularly well, and we'll pick that up tomorrow as we look at the song that Moses is instructed by God to write in chapter 32.